My name is Veronica Hale. I am a 46-year-old corporate strategist living in Seattle, Washington. At 7:32 a.m., I opened the front door to find a small, bundled infant lying in a soft blanket on my porch with a hastily scribbled note that read only, "He is yours. I am gone." My son-in-law had vanished without explanation, leaving me with a life-altering responsibility that I neither anticipated nor sought. I stared at the fragile body, the weight of sudden guardianship pressing into my chest like ice, and realized then that the person I trusted most could abandon not just promises, but a child. Every instinct screamed disbelief, yet I understood immediately that this was only the beginning. Veronica Hale had always believed that love and ambition could coexist, and for nearly 2 decades, that belief had shaped her life with Michael, her husband, and once closest confidant. They met at a corporate retreat in Chicago when she was 28, a rising strategist eager to prove her worth, and he was charming, articulate, and dazzling in his intellect, immediately recognizing the fire in her ambition. Their connection had been electric yet grounded, conversations stretching late into the night about strategy, life, and the shared dreams they would one day build together, until it became clear that they were not only lovers, but partners in creating a world of stability and elegance. Together, they purchased their home on Lake Union in Seattle, a space they renovated meticulously, painting walls in muted grays and blues, designing a kitchen where mornings felt ceremonial, a living room that reflected warmth and shared history, and an office that held their plans for the future, each piece of furniture, each photograph carefully chosen as a testament to their joint vision. Veronica had inherited a modest but meaningful trust from her late aunt, a woman she revered as a mentor, or which she quietly funneled into their home improvements and Michael's fledgling ventures, knowing that her sacrifices would fuel their shared legacy. Evenings were spent reviewing spreadsheets, balancing budgets, and planning trips, while weekends held lessons in patience and teamwork, a rhythm that created the illusion of perfect balance. Yet beneath the surface, cracks had begun to form. Michael's career had always come first, a priority that required late nights, frequent retreats, and strategic absences, while Veronica's contributions, though substantial, often remained unspoken, her own promotions delayed or sidelined in the service of his growth. Still, she loved him with measured certainty, believing that compromise was part of partnership, that her sacrifices were investments in a life they would one day share equally, and that loyalty meant quiet endurance. She cherished the family traditions, the summer breakfasts on the balcony, the inherited silverware she polished every Sunday, and the journal of lessons her aunt had left her, which reminded her that intelligence and patience could overcome even the most formidable obstacles, though she did not yet know that patience would soon be tested in ways she had never imagined, nor that the stability they had painstakingly built could be stripped away by a single moment of betrayal. The first time Veronica noticed a shift, it was subtle. Michael began guarding his phone as if it contained a separate world, sliding it into a drawer when she entered the room, changing passwords she had known for years, and logging out of shared accounts without explanation. At first, she attributed it to stress, deadlines, or corporate discretion, but the pattern intensified, accompanied by an emotional withdrawal that she could not ignore. The warmth of his gaze replaced by distracted nods, the late-night laughter in their kitchen, and replaced by silence, and casual mentions of business trips or retreats that never seemed to produce details. Only evasions, as if he existed simultaneously in another life that excluded her. Friends, once easy companions to both, began to drop remarks that unsettled her, like offhand comments about colleagues she had never met, rumors she had no desire to verify, and observations she dismissed at first, too polite to probe, until the small inconsistencies built a mosaic of unease she could no longer ignore. She noticed receipts that did not match his explanations, slight hesitations in conversation, the way his suit jacket smelled of unfamiliar cologne, the faint scent of perfume that she did not recognize, and the inexplicable late returns home that disrupted the rhythm they had established. At family gatherings, he would drift from her side, answering phone calls with whispered tones, stepping outside when a call came through, or offering vague summaries of meetings she suspected were fabrications, and when she asked, his explanations were plausible enough to satisfy casual scrutiny, but insufficient to soothe the rising tension she carried. The lies were never dramatic, never confrontational, but accumulative, stacking like layers of dust on a once clear surface, subtle enough that doubt crept into her mind alongside disbelief, until every interaction became measured, every question weighed, every gesture parsed for hidden meaning. She felt herself standing on a precipice where love met suspicion, trust intersected with uncertainty, and the life she had meticulously constructed with Michael now trembled under invisible pressure. She did not panic. She did not raise her voice. She simply observed, cataloging behaviors, noting deviations from their routines, the alterations in tone, the micro-expressions that betrayed anxiety or deceit, recognizing that the fractures were real and intentional, that the life of openness and shared dreams they had once inhabited was no longer guaranteed, and that her instincts, honed by years of calculated patience and emotional intelligence, were signaling a silent alarm she could neither ignore nor dismiss, preparing her for the awakening that would come when the truth no longer hid behind polite evasions, half-truths, and innocuous lies stacked into a careful, deliberate pattern of betrayal. Veronica's awareness shifted from unease to methodical observation the morning she accessed their shared cloud storage while Michael was away on another vague business retreat, scrolling through folders she had always assumed contained routine documents, only to find a collection of spreadsheets, PDF transfer confirmations, and screenshots that immediately suggested careful, deliberate planning hidden from her. Emails flagged for deletion revealed conversations with financial consultants, messages outlining transfers to accounts she had never authorized, and correspondence with individuals whose identities were unfamiliar yet precise. Each detail documented with an obsessive clarity that hinted at a scheme meticulously orchestrated beyond her notice. On the home server, she discovered a series of folders labeled with nondescript names: project, timeline, review, containing scanned documents, notes, and calendar entries that, when pieced together, revealed the contours of a plan that intersected with their joint finances, her inherited trust, and assets she had assumed remained secure under their joint oversight. Veronica photographed and cataloged everything, carefully creating an offline record that could not be altered or erased, storing transfer notes alongside financial summaries, screenshots of emails, and copies of contracts in a secure location, her movements deliberate and controlled, each click and scroll an act of quiet assertion rather than panic, her pulse steady despite the gravity of what she overread. She traced IP addresses, cross-referenced timestamps, and noted recurring patterns in communication, revealing that Michael had coordinated with external advisors and trusted colleagues in a network designed to exclude her entirely, all while maintaining a facade of marital normalcy. Every revelation was absorbed with a detached clarity, her emotions tempered by the knowledge that reaction could be weaponized, that any display of shock or anger would diminish the advantage she now held. In her study, the evening light casting long shadows across polished surfaces, she reviewed bank statements against the screenshots, noting discrepancies, identifying timing and amounts, understanding not only the scope of the betrayal, but the intention behind it, the calculated confidence that assumed her ignorance would persist indefinitely. In that moment, Veronica experienced a profound shift, the realization that she was no longer the unwitting observer of her life, but the architect of her own response, a strategist awakened by deception, with the patience, intelligence, and discipline to dismantle the network of lies methodically. She did not shout, she did not confront yet, but she understood the power of knowledge, the weight of evidence, and the advantage of silence combined with precision, recognizing that the awakening of her clarity was itself a form of authority, and that each documented detail, each carefully saved screenshot, each transferred note, positioned her not as a victim, but as a force quietly gathering momentum, ready to act with surgical efficiency, demonstrating to viewers that while betrayal may unsettle, it can also awaken a profound capacity for control, turning vulnerability into the quiet, devastating power of awareness, strategy, and the unshakable resolve to reclaim what had been deliberately hidden, setting the stage for a confrontation where calm and elegance outweighs impulsive emotion and precision eclipses recklessness, revealing that she is fully, irrevocably awake. Veronica shifted from discovery to action with the precision of someone who had spent years balancing strategy and patience, beginning with a review of the trust her late aunt had established, a legal instrument designed not merely to preserve assets but to safeguard beneficiaries in unforeseen circumstances, which she now realized could be leveraged as both shield and sword against Michael's covert manipulations. She contacted the attorney who had managed the trust for decades, a composed, meticulous professional who had guided her aunt through complex estate arrangements, and alongside him engaged a financial expert with experience in forensic accounting, assembling a team whose expertise matched the subtlety and sophistication of the threat she faced. Within hours, they developed a plan to monitor all transactions related to her inheritance, including automatic alerts for transfers, detailed audits of bank statements, and a centralized repository of all documentation, screenshots, and emails she had already compiled, ensuring that no detail would be overlooked or misrepresented. Veronica studied the legal framework surrounding trusts, fiduciary obligations, and marital financial disclosures, confirming that the law favored her position and that her aunt's foresight had created a formidable safety net, a structure that could withstand any attempt to bypass it through secrecy or manipulation. She methodically prepared evidence packets, organizing digital and physical documentation in triplicate, annotating discrepancies, flagging suspicious transfers, and cross-referencing dates and amounts with precision, knowing that clarity and order would speak louder in court than any emotional outburst. She established a monitoring system that extended to M, all executed quietly, deliberately, without haste or visible agitation, replacing the emotional turbulence she had felt in the early stages of suspicion with calculated purpose. Every step was measured, surgical, as though each move were a chess piece advancing across a board, anticipating his potential countermoves, exploiting his overconfidence, and preparing for moments when the law could be invoked decisively. Veronica internalized a new rhythm, where patience and documentation outweighed confrontation, where silence and observation were as powerful as spoken objections, and where her awareness of legal leverage transformed anxiety into strategic authority, demonstrating to herself that control could be reclaimed without spectacle, that precision could neutralize deception, and that the moral and legal foundation she inherited was a weapon she wielded not recklessly, but with measured intention. By the end of the week, she had established protocols for real-time alerts, secured her assets, and positioned herself to act with authority in any legal forum, understanding fully that the power she now exercised was rooted in preparation, law, and discipline, that each documented transfer and each monitored account served as both shield and instrument, and that Michael's previous assumption that she would remain passive had been utterly miscalculated, setting the stage for a confrontation where her calm, controlled authority would leave no room for ambiguity, and her awakening would translate into undeniable power, proving that foresight, expertise, and measured execution could convert betrayal into a platform for decisive, legally grounded reclamation. When Veronica finally faced Michael in the study where they had once planned vacations and reviewed financial projections together, she did so without anger, without accusation, and without the tremor of past betrayal. Stan. Ding with a quiet confidence that immediately unsettled him, as he had expected, hesitation, tears, or a desperate plea. He leaned against the mahogany desk, arms crossed, smirking with the overconfidence of someone convinced that charm and dismissiveness could mask exposure, and offered a casual, "I did what I had to do, you would not understand," believing her silence to be compliance, a surrender he could exploit, unaware that she had already cataloged every email, every transfer, every manipulated account, and irregular transaction. She spoke deliberately, her voice steady and precise, stating only facts and questions that highlighted discrepancies he had assumed were hidden, never raising her tone, never gesturing wildly, allowing each sentence to land with quiet authority, punctuating the space between them with the weight of unshakable observation. He attempted deflection, claiming miscommunication, misremembered dates, and minor errors, yet she responded with pointed references, dates, and evidence, never breaking composure, letting the weight of proof act as her voice, each carefully chosen word a measured strike rather than an emotional outburst. As he laughed lightly, thinking her poise a weakness, she maintained eye contact, letting silence stretch between statements, allowing him to fill the gaps with excuses and rationalizations that only revealed more about his arrogance and miscalculations. He tried a final gambit, suggesting negotiation, appealing to their shared past, but she did not falter, did not plead, did not waver, simply responded with the measured clarity of someone who understood leverage, law, and strategy, leaving him unbalanced because he could not predict the level of control she now exercised, unable to anticipate the precision of her restraint. As the conversation ended, she gathered her documents, placing them carefully back into the bar folders, the motion deliberate, almost ceremonial, and left the room without a backward glance, leaving him staring at her retreating figure, unsure of the outcome, questioning both his own judgment and the assumptions he had made about her weakness. In that moment, her power was defined not by confrontation or theatrics, but by calm authority, meticulous preparation, and the certainty that knowledge and restraint could unsettle far more profoundly than anger. And she understood fully that the psychological advantage had shifted irrevocably, that he could no longer rely on charm or deception to dictate the narrative, and that the quiet patience and unwavering composure she maintained would be the defining force in the unraveling to come, leaving him in a space of doubt and anticipation that she controlled entirely. The unraveling began quietly, almost imperceptibly, when Michael's lawyer contacted Veronica under the pretense of clarification, a thinly veiled attempt to intimidate her, but she received the email with the calm detachment of someone fully aware of the leverage she held, responding with pointed questions and requests for documentation that immediately forced them into defensive positions. As she compiled and presented trust data, transfer logs, and IP traces she had meticulously documented, the inconsistencies became undeniable, revealing not only financial fraud, but the deliberate manipulation of joint accounts and trust assets. Actions he had assumed were invisible beneath layers of deceit, yet now exposed with surgical precision. Each document she produced, each timestamp she referenced, became a hammer striking at the foundations of the carefully curated narrative he had constructed, leaving his lawyer scrambling to reconcile the discrepancies, while Michael's attempts at casual dismissal faltered under the weight of proof and the inevitability of legal scrutiny. Colleagues and mutual acquaintances, who had once been innocuous observers, began to notice subtle shifts, whispers of emergency, hearings, unusual audits, and sudden withdrawals from boards or committees, magnifying the pressure he could not escape, and with every passing day, his overconfidence eroded, replaced by the realization that the structures he had relied upon to shield his actions were failing. As an emergency hearing was scheduled, Veronica maintained her composed silence, her presence in the courtroom a quiet assertion of authority, the calm of her demeanor amplifying the disarray in Michael's conduct. While every cross-examination, every citation of her evidence punctuated the extent of his miscalculations, exposing both his financial duplicity and the emotional betrayals that had remained hidden for years. She observed the proceedings with a measured patience, understanding that the law would unravel the tangled web of lies far more efficiently than confrontation or dramatic revelation ever could, allowing him to collapse under scrutiny without a single show of anger on her part, her silence acting as both shield and pressure point, turning his desperation into visible agitation. Witnesses she had prepared, statements she had corroborated, and documents she had securely archived converged to form an unassailable argument, leaving Michael visibly unsettled, unable to anticipate or influence the sequence of disclosures as they methodically dismantled the illusion of control he had maintained. By the conclusion of the hearing, the courtroom recognized the extent of his mismanagement and deception, while Veronica, composed and unshaken, had transformed from a quietly observant spouse into a commanding force whose patience, preparation, and unwavering clarity ensured that every lie was accounted for, every falsification exposed, and every attempt at diversion nullified, leaving Michael powerless, not because of theatrics or confrontation, but because the evidence, timing, and her calm authority had orchestrated an unrelenting collapse of his hidden world, proving that control, discipline, and meticulous strategy could dismantle arrogance and betrayal far more effectively than anger ever could, and that the quiet observer could wield silence as the most potent instrument of public reckoning. Veronica approached the resolution with the same measured clarity that had defined every step of her awakening, entering settlement negotiations not with vengeance in mind, but with the precise intent of securing closure and reclaiming control, listening carefully as Michael's representatives attempted to minimize obligations while offering partial concessions. Each proposal met with calm, deliberate counterpoints supported by the exhaustive documentation she had compiled, ensuring that every term reinforced her legal and moral position. Ultimately, she agreed to a settlement that included a return of specific funds, structured in a manner that protected the assets her aunt's trust had safeguarded, and she insisted on a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement that prevented further claims or manipulations, simultaneously securing her financial and emotional boundaries, and leaving Michael without avenues for dispute or delay. She accepted what was returned with no fanfare, no gloating, simply noting the transactions and confirming that the agreements were executed exactly as intended. Her satisfaction derived from precision rather than emotion, understanding that quiet triumph outweighed dramatic confrontation, and that asserting authority with integrity was more powerful than any spectacle of retaliation. Throughout the process, she maintained the moral high ground, refusing to escalate matters, avoiding public statements, and declining opportunities to humiliate him, recognizing that the law, documentation, and her composed presence were efficient to assert accountability, and that forcing theatrics would diminish the strength of the victory she had earned. Friends and advisors noted the serenity she carried, the way she navigated negotiations with patience and unshakable focus, never allowing personal grievance to overshadow strategic intent, demonstrating that measured action and moral clarity could achieve outcomes far beyond reactive emotion. By the conclusion of the settlement, Veronica had not only secured financial restitution and legal certainty, but also reclaimed her sense of agency, transforming what had been a period of betrayal and uncertainty into a demonstration of controlled power, discipline, and wisdom, proving that quiet resolution, grounded in preparation and moral fortitude, was capable of delivering justice with elegance and authority. In choosing peace over punishment, she underscored the principle that triumph need not be loud or vindictive, that victory could manifest in careful, restrained action that preserved dignity, restored balance, and affirmed self-respect, allowing her to walk away not as someone defeated or diminished by betrayal, but as a woman who had navigated deception, exposure, and confrontation with precision, leaving behind a legacy of strength, strategy, and quiet reclamation, and demonstrating that the most devastating outcomes could arise not from anger, but from calm, deliberate, and morally grounded choice. Veronica walked through the empty rooms of the Lake Union house one final time, tracing her fingers along the polished countertops and the walls they had painted together, breathing in the faint scent of cedar and lavender that had always been her comfort, before signing the papers to sell the symbolic home that had held both dreams and betrayals, knowing that letting go of the space was not a loss but a release, a step toward reclaiming life on her own to Yale. Erms. With the proceeds, she established a foundation in her late aunt's name, a legacy fund dedicated to supporting young women pursuing careers in strategic business and law, ensuring that her mentor's guidance, once whispered across letters and journals, would continue to shape futures long after Veronica had moved on. She initiated a scholarship in the Foundation's first cycle, selecting recipients not only for merit but for resilience, recognizing the quiet strength required to navigate a world where trust and ambition often collided, and finding in their gratitude a reflection of the lessons she had internalized about patience, preparation, and moral clarity. One morning, a package arrived at her new apartment in downtown Portland, simple and unassuming, containing a check for a sum she had never expected and an unsigned note that read only, "For what was lost and cannot be returned," a gesture devoid of apology but heavy with acknowledgement, which she accepted with the calm composure that had become her hallmark, tucking it into the Foundation's account as a symbol of closure rather than triumph, proof that the arc of justice need not be loud to be complete. She walked to the balcony of her new home, the city unfolding below in a pattern of light and movement, and felt the quiet thrill of freedom, the assurance that she had preserved dignity, reclaimed agency, and transformed betrayal into opportunity, knowing that every decision, from investigation to confrontation, from legal action to moral resolution, had been deliberate, measured, and true to her values. As she sipped her morning tea, sunlight spilling across the floorboards, she reflected that the future was no longer a threat, but an open path, that her career, her purpose, and her legacy were hers alone to cultivate, and that the past, once heavy with deception and loss, had become a foundation for renewal. With a final, steady breath, Veronica closed the balcony door behind her, feeling a serene certainty in her stride, the weight of betrayal lifted, the power of clarity retained, and the peace of having walked through fire into a life redesigned entirely on her own terms, leaving behind not regret but a calm, unshakable sense of rebirth and the quiet knowledge that she was fully, irrevocably free,